Hey people, how you doing? So, this right here, it's a bit of an unusual matchup because on one hand with the Pixel 7 Pro, the flagship from Pixel, 80,000 rupees, and yes, from last year, but it is still one of the absolute best photography devices that you can buy right now. It's an incredible camera, no doubt about that. I mean, obviously, it's a Pixel device, so yeah. On the other hand, the Phantom X2 Pro. Now this is an interesting one because it costs way less in terms of the launch prices. That's the most fair comparison that I can do right now because this is 50,000 versus 80, so a 30,000 price gap. This one stands firmly in premium mid-range device category, not a flagship. That's not nearly as much as it costs. So yeah, I have high hopes for this. Usually in cases like these, the difference is very apparent. Maybe it will be, maybe not. Let's find out. Alright, we're starting off simple with the main camera shot, and I'm only calling it simple because both of these phones, they're pretty much absolutely nailing it with the white balance. And trust me, I've seen more than enough incredible smartphones with incredible cameras just go down in a tailspin when it comes to super warm sunlight, like in these cases, but these two are not gonna suffer from that. If anything, I just want to say that personally, I like the Pixel a little bit more. Higher contrast is kind of my thing. Now then, for 2x zoom, well, 2x on the Pixel because we get sensor crop at that stage, and then for the X2 Pro, we actually get 2.5x zoom with a retractable camera. There's a good reason for that, you get a wide aperture, more light and all that jazz, and we'll get to that, but in this case, as I said before, I really like high contrast, and I think the X2 Pro just looks too flat. Even for someone who prefers low contrast, this is looking like it's gonna be something way lower than what you would expect. For me, the Pixel is a straight up winner because higher contrast, much better saturation, it just looks far better. At 5x, surprisingly, both of the phones have started to wash out the image now, and this is actually something very common. I've seen this happen with the S22 Ultra as well. I know the S23 is like right around the corner. It's gonna get here soon enough, hopefully, and then we can test that beast of a camera out. But anyways, I do think that at 5x, obviously the Pixel is going to be the better one because it has optical zoom at that stage compared to the Phantom, but I wish it wouldn't wash out the image as much. Now for 10x zoom, well, it's sort of a similar situation. Of course, the Pixel is the one that's taking a lead with 10x because not only does it have the full benefit of 5x periscope, but it can also use sensor crop on top of that to get very high quality 10x zoom shots. So that's good, but I wish, once again, a little bit more contrast in the shots, even from the Pixel, which tends to have high contrast. So that's kind of a surprising thing that it doesn't give us high contrast when we zoom in. But then let's move on to the ultra wide camera, and this is where things are gonna get sort of interesting. Now in this case, I do want to say that both phones are once again nailing it. Yes, warm sunlight, really warm sunlight. You can especially see it on the Pixel 7 Pro. It obviously tends to saturate things a little bit. The Phantom, on the other hand, it is not terrible, but the ultra wide camera is not the best, especially on the Phantom. And in normal daylight shots, you won't notice a huge difference, but especially if you take one like this indoors, you can see the difference in the wallpaper. There's a weird tint going on the Phantom, and the detail preservation, even without zooming in, it's pretty obvious that the Pixel is doing a slightly better job. But of course, when we do crop into 500%, you can see that the Pixel has a lot more texture detail going on. While the Phantom, it has more grain, less detail. So overall, you're not gonna be very satisfied with the ultra-wide camera. And if you wanna take backlit shots like these, then it's best to not just even try them because the Phantom is really screwing things up. Not only do we get a weird green tint all across the image, just look at the table. And then just check out the table on the Pixel. It looks far better, far more natural, and just overall the detail preservation, the noise reduction, the shadow detail, all of it is so much better on the Pixel that it's a night and day difference. Now when it comes to macro, now the Pixel obviously it has a really good macro mode. You get real up close, you get a toggle, and then you take a macro shot. On the other hand, we have the Phantom, which doesn't even tell you that it can do macro shots. At least I haven't found any such mode. The only way I could take this shot was to just switch to the ultra wide camera and then get up close and personal. I wish there was some kind of indication because I was lucky enough to find it. A lot of people who buy this phone may not have been. So yeah, it's a little odd that we don't have an indication that the ultra wide camera is indeed capable of macro shots. And at least in this case, the macro shot isn't turning out to be very good because it's very, very washed out on the Phantom, but The capability is there, it's just that the phone doesn't tell you. Now, backlit shots with the main camera. I must say, this was a very difficult situation, and it may be because of that, but I do think that the Phantom struggled a lot with the focusing. Like when I was taking the shot, I had to constantly try and use manual focus, and even then it wouldn't really work out. And it was a bit of an issue. The Pixel obviously had no problems as such. And another thing that may have arisen because of the focusing issues is that the detail preservation in the shot at least was not very good. I mean, you can see, right, the overall texture detail on the Pixel is far better compared to the Phantom X2 Pro, and indeed this is the sharpest point in the image. I made sure of that. I did take another one, this one, I really like the shot, to be entirely honest. It looks really nice on both phones, and even the subject, a very nice one, even if I do say so myself. But anyways, point is that in this case the Phantom didn't struggle with the focusing, and the detail preservation is far better compared to the previous. Maybe the subject on the previous one just didn't really work out for the processing. This one, it looks really nice on both, no real complaints. As for the 50 megapixel mode on the Phantom X2 Pro, now as you may know already, the Pixel 7 Pro, it has 50 megapixel sensor, but it cannot shoot 50 megapixel photos. I'm not sure why there is such a weird limitation, but it's just the way it is. And I mean, I'm not really complaining, because the Pixel, even with 12 megapixel, it's doing a better job compared to the Phantom X2 Pro. I mean, the 12.5 versus 50 megapixels that we get on the X2 Pro, it just seems like something on paper, and it really doesn't translate. At least in this case, it did not. I did try to lower the exposure on the X2 Pro as well. Didn't really work out. Now the Phantom also gives us 50 megapixels with its optical zoom, which is kind of interesting. And well, I like that the X2 Pro is really diving knee deep into the optical zoom, but with just the sensor crop on the Pixel 7 Pro. If we zoom in, once again 500% crop. And yes, the Phantom does seem to have less over-sharpening and slightly less processing artifacts for basically similar levels of detail. But I mean, the difference is very minimal. In a way, it's a compliment for the Pixel 7 Pro, because it at least appears to me that the sensor crop's quality has gone up on the Pixel with some updates. But I mean, it also goes to show that even with 50 megapixels, the X2 Pro's processing can't really take full advantage of it now, can it? But then, let's move on to selfies, and in this case, there are two major things to keep in mind. On one hand, we have the Phantom X2 Pro, which will overexpose a lot. At least I think it looks overexposed. Maybe you like bright selfies a lot, and maybe that's the kind of shots you want. That's gonna be up to you. But for me, the Pixel looks about 10 times better because it just has so much better contrast. The exposure looks right to my eyes. The only thing that doesn't fit properly on the Pixel is that it is adding this weird magenta tint to the entire image. You can especially see it not just on my skin, but also on my t-shirt. It's supposed to be great, but it has an almost violet hue to it, and that's not exactly accurate, now is it? As for this one, well, it was a difficult shot, needless to say, and the Phantom, as you can see, is overexposing a lot of the highlights. Doesn't really look very appealing now, does it? And it's very washed out, needless to say. And as you know, I really like high contrast, so for me, the Pixel is a clear winner. Obviously, we once again have the magenta. You can see it quite clearly on my shirt. As for a fully backlit selfie, well, the Phantom messed up the first one. Initially I thought, wow, that's not what I expected, and indeed, I expected something much better. And well, credit where due, the Phantom did manage to take the subsequent 4 selfies to look really nice. As you can see, it's not doing a bad job at all. Now comparatively, I once again prefer the Pixel 7 Pro. I think the exposure control and the contrast looks far better. Now of course, the Pixel also has a little bit more noise, especially in the shadows. And it's actually kind of impressive on the Phantom because, despite the fact that it is very flat and has a lot of lifted shadows, it is managing to handle the noise quite well. Now when it comes to portrait selfies, well, it's a very similar situation. I like the Pixel 7 Pro for the higher contrast. Now if you like lower contrast, obviously go for the Phantom. That's really going to be up to you. But then the skin tones, you got that crazy magenta thing happening again, and I do think that the overall edge detection is slightly better on the Pixel as well. So yes, once again, my overall pick is going to be the Pixel. It just looks a little bit better. Now in this case, we obviously had a pretty bright light in the background, and I do think that the Pixel, it looks nice, but the magenta, it's starting to bother me now because honestly, I'm not sure why it keeps adding so much magenta into the shot, but it's it's really not that appealing, to be entirely honest. At least to my eyes, I wish it would stop that and give us nice accurate skin tones. Now then, a fully backlit portrait, and it's a very similar situation. Although I do want to admit that the Pixel 7 Pro is faring far worse, especially with all the noise on my t-shirt and the shadows on my face. It really doesn't look very nice, now does it? The Phantom is doing a very good job with that noise reduction. It is flat, it doesn't have almost any contrast, sure, but the noise reduction is definitely worthy of some praise at least. As for night mode selfies, well, I'm kind of surprised by just how much the Pixel is struggling, because I kind of remember it being pretty good at it. Maybe the situation was fairly dark, but comparatively speaking, the Phantom is not doing nearly as well as a Pixel in this case. A very similar situation with night mode portrait selfies as well. The Pixel, not too shabby, not the best either, while the Phantom obviously is just falling behind at this point. Now, rear camera portraits, well, in this case I do think that the Pixel is doing a far better job, because this was taken during the sunset and you can very easily see all of that warm sunlight hitting my face, and it looks very nice and accurate on the Pixel 7 Pro. This is where there's supposed to be some magenta and it's doing a very good job with that, but the Phantom, it's overcompensating for that warmth, and it doesn't even look like I took this during a sunset. It looks like a regular portrait shot. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world, it still looks pretty good, but I do think that for color accuracy alone, I think now the Pixel is doing a really good job. Now for this one, it is a fairly tough situation. As you can see, the Extra Pro is struggling quite a bit. I do think that it's messing up the white balance, and a lot of the skin tones looks very desaturated. Even my t-shirt looks very desaturated on the Extra Pro. The Pixel, on the other hand, is doing a phenomenal job, let's face it. It's just looking very nice. The saturation looks very good, and it's basically retaining all the details and the colors quite well. But then you go to 2x zoom, and yeah, this is where the Pixel falls apart. The Phantom, on the other hand, with 2.5x zoom, you can take some really nice portraits. As you can see, it looks very nice, highly detailed, no over sharpening or anything like that. The noise levels are basically non-existent. It looks really nice. And this one was, again, very backlit, very difficult situation, and the Phantom is struggling, needless to say. It obviously doesn't have the same messed up look as the Pixel, but it also has no contrast, so neither of these photos are really blowing my mind. They are blowing my mind in the wrong way, that's the problem here, I think. As for night mode portraits, well, I once again think that the situation was a little too dark, maybe, because even the Pixel is struggling a little. There's a bit of smoothing going on and a bit of artifacting and all that jazz, but it does look better compared to the Phantom. Now the Phantom, in its defense, it's not the worst image. It does have good edge detection. It actually managed to take a portrait shot. The colors look pretty nice. Noise reduction is where it's really lacking. Now finally, for regular night mode shots, well, I do think that both phones, given the situation, there's a lot of different colored lights and it's a pretty dark scene altogether, and yeah, I do think both are doing a really good job, but I do prefer the Pixel for one simple reason: it is not making all of those greens and the plants in the foreground look desaturated. I'm not sure why it's making them look like that, because the rest of the image looks good. It's odd, to be entirely honest. I'm not sure why we are even getting that look. Well, the Pixel, obviously, it looks nearly flawless basically in this case. Now here's another one, and it was much darker, and I do think that the fundamentals like the noise reduction, the HDR, detail preservation, all of that, it's being handled pretty damn well on both phones. I do think that the Pixel is doing a better job with the sky, while the Phantom has a bit of artifacting going on, but the biggest reason why I prefer the Pixel in this case is just quite simply the green and the plants in the foreground. I'm not sure why it keeps desaturating those particular plants. It's odd, to be entirely honest, because if you look at the farther parts of the image, it looks very close on both. It's just the foreground greens that look oddly desaturated and just as if the life was sucked out of them. It's weird, but that's just what we're getting. As for the ultra-wide camera, well, I included just one image in this case because I did take a lot of them, but in every single one there was just one major difference. The quality of the shot from the Phantom Extra Pro, it just doesn't look good. It stands no chance compared to the Pixel 7 Pro. There is a significant difference even in broad daylight when it comes to the ultra-wide between these two. At night, that difference is just exponentially multiplied, and obviously the Pixel is going to do a much better job because not only does it have a better overall camera, the processing is insane on the Pixel, as you know already. Now 2x zoom, this is actually what I was most interested in, because the Phantom has the retractable camera system, and that's presumably because it can use a 1.5 open aperture. That's very wide open and it allows a lot of light to come in. So I'm hoping for good stuff here. Now, of course, the Pixel has the fabulous sensor crop, which is better than ever. And if you zoom in, as you can see, the major thing that I'm looking at is that the noise reduction and the artifacting, that's the problem on the Phantom X2 Pro. Overall, both are very close. I do think that actually the detail preservation might be a pinch better on the Phantom compared to the Pixel, but it's really close and both are doing a very good job here. It actually speaks volumes about just how good the Pixel's processing is, that it can keep up with a really good high quality optical zoom camera on the Phantom X2 Pro. But then I wanted to try an even darker situation, because the previous one we had a fair bit of light. So in this case, yeah, we actually get a fair bit of difference. Just not what I expected, to be entirely honest, because I thought that with the actual hardware advantage that the Phantom X2 Pro has, it might actually pull ahead, but that's not the case. So if you do want to take darker, like really dark 2x zoom shots or 2.5x zoom shots, then the Pixel is actually going to pull ahead. I mean, it again speaks volumes about the good old processing that Pixel has, because man, that thing is insane. Now, I get it. To be entirely fair, the Phantom X2 Pro is a far less expensive device. It's 50,000 compared to, I believe, like 85 for the Pixel. I mean, that's massive, right? Obviously. To be entirely honest, there are not a lot of phones in this price range, around 50,000 rupees, that can actually compete with the Phantom X2 Pro's camera prowess. It is a very good camera for a very low price tag, and I do respect that. So with that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed this comparison, found it helpful, maybe, and well, I'll be seeing you guys with more soon enough. Cheers!